Welcome to Two Angry Men, the newest podcast with Los Angeles Magazine's own Mark Geragos and TMZ's Harvey Levin, where the two get together and talk about the biggest legal stories of the day. Enjoy.
You're saying that there is another suspect other than David who the LAPD has its sights set on with respect to what happened to Celeste before, during, and after her death, correct?
Correct.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. Mark, the singer David is in big trouble. We now know, and I can give you this 100%, although the medical examiner has not yet determined cause of death, nor has the toxicology report been given over to the LAPD, the LAPD robbery homicide unit is viewing the death of Celeste Rivas as a homicide, and David is a suspect. And he is a
David is not the only suspect.
And David is not the only suspect. But what I am told is that at least one other suspect, it's not necessarily in connection to the murder, it's in connection to dismembering the body. And I think this all has to do with a mysterious trip to Santa Barbara in the middle of the night last spring. And I got details. What do you got?
Okay, so not only that, but you know how we've almost got whiplash on this story from, I think you were the one who had said that all of your sources had dried up like very, very early on this. And you were actually quite surprised.
Not anymore.
And the reason for that, by the way, my surmise, wild speculation, they not only got the records that support what you were saying is 100%, that he took a trip to Santa Barbara County, but they now also, and you may have reported this, I'm not in the weeds on the TMZ feed, but they've got his social media and have tied up social media with some of the trips, and they've got cell phone records that they have poured over, and they have triangulated this to the point where it's eerie. I saw this 10 years ago on another murder case that I had, but when it was in the infancy stages, they've got a chart at LAPD that you would not believe. They've got this thing down to a timeline that's almost by the minutes triangulated to the location, if you can believe that. And it's not just one source. When I say triangulated, it's media, social media, cell phone, Tesla, other, and all I'll say is other kind of GPS tracking devices, if you will. And it's really, I used to joke, or my father used to joke, LAPD is lost and presumed destroyed. They actually have elevated their game, and this is quite a feat of investigation so far.
That's fascinating. So let me tell you what we know, because it aligns with what you just said, that in the spring, David took a trip to a very remote area of Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night and spent several hours there. We have also been told, yes, there is another suspect, but the suspect is somebody they believe helped him dismember the body, because what we were told by multiple sources is they believe that more than one person dismembered the body. Now, I don't think they can conclude that just by looking at it. I mean, look, Jeffrey Dahmer dismembered a body completely, and he did it alone. So there's some reason they're saying he had help, and it's not just the way the body was cut up. So here's my theory, and I've got a little bit of evidence on this too, but my theory is that they may have done this in Santa Barbara County. And the reason there may be another suspect is that, yes, there's cell phone data, but I think more important, there might be Tesla video. Remember, Tesla has cameras on the car, and the LAPD, we're told, has gained access to that data and clearly that video. What if there is video of not just David in the car, but a second person in the car? And then the question, do they have any evidence the body was possibly dismembered there? I'm going to tell you something, and I cannot be more specific, but there was an offhanded comment made to me by somebody connected to all of this about possibly hiding the body there. I mean, just the words hiding the body. And it was posed kind of as a hypothetical, but it's somebody with some knowledge. And so what I'm thinking is that I don't think they took Celeste to Santa Barbara County and killed her, if that's indeed what happened to Celeste. Whatever happened probably happened somewhere else, maybe in LA, and that the body was taken to Santa Barbara County, and maybe the body was dismembered there. Now, what I can't answer is, how does it then end up in his trunk? And that I can't figure out, back in Los Angeles. But that Santa Barbara trip is the key to this case, Mark. I'm telling you, I've been on the phone personally on this one, and that Santa Barbara trip is the key.
Yeah, and by the way, the whiplash that I've talked about in terms of the reporting on this as well, that whiplash also had to do with, at first, they weren't even sure that it was dismembered because of the degradation. And so that took a little while, which was another reason they were being so kind of tight and close to the vest, so to speak. But it wasn't just, I'm told, it was not just the trip itself. It was the confirmation of the social media. And for those who think that, and I know I've heard people talk about this, and people who are frequently on social media, they think that the phone is the only thing that is tracking you. But when you post that, whether it's posting on a phone or anything else, the use of the social media platform itself is basically something that is utilized as well, that can determine your location. And so if you've got that, you've got your phone, you've got a time when you post some kind of a social media story, if you will. All of these things have now been utilized, and is one of the reasons it's taken so long, because search warrants have been executed on a number of these platforms or providers, and they were waiting to get back the information. They also clearly have yet another person that is a target of this, not just David, but they've got somebody else. And I haven't heard yet whether that person is talking or cooperating. But if it's anything like the feds, the first person in is the person who's going to try to talk or cut a deal.
We need to talk about this. So my information is that the other suspect and or suspects has to do with dismembering the body. Is your information that this could actually have to do with her death?
Yeah, and I've got a name, but I'm not going to put it out there. I've already been told a name as well. And
A name of a suspect?
of another person besides him.
In
And
connection with the death or the dismemberment?
But they're not ruling anything out. I mean, everything is on the table. They have kept this wide open because they believe, and they believed since the beginning, since the get-go, that there was more than one person involved, which, by the way, you and I had talked about this way back when, that it appeared that there had to be more people than just David who were involved, at least, or knew something that was going on. That's still a working hypothesis. And I know that they focused in at least secondarily and have not ruled anything out as to another person.
I want to press on this because what you're saying, you and I have not talked about this
We
until
haven't
now.
talked about this at all.
I know.
Correct.
So my independent information from multiple sources is that the suspect is somebody involved in the dismemberment of the body. That's very different from involved in the a homicide itself. So what you're getting is really important because I have not gotten a name. You say you actually have a name. I haven't
Oh, I
gotten.
actually have a I actually have a name. I mean, there's some I'm not if I mentioned how or if I mentioned a couple of things, and I don't want to betray somebody who gave it to me, but I will tell you that there is somebody that they have identified. There is somebody that they have not ruled out involvement before, during, or after. You know, there's a when you do a autopsy, you talk about injuries. Is it post-mortem? Is it perimortem? Is it before? They haven't ruled anything out that way. One of the reasons, in my humble opinion, that the coroner and the pathologist has not released the report yet. And, you know, there were rumblings that as we are taping this today, there were rumblings that it was going to be
It's
today.
not. It's not going to be. We confirm that. There was some activity on that, on the website on her page, and her name has now been scrubbed. So it looks like there's a security hold on this, which is unsurprising.
Well, that isn't surprising because I think they do not want to release information that could jeopardize the investigation. And, you know, there is a symbiotic relationship between law enforcement and the coroner's office. I
Ha!
mean, I know
Guess
how,
what? Guess what?
yeah.
I was told that there is a problem with this, and let me tell you what I know. That one of the sources I talked to this week was saying that the LAPD and the medical examiner have had a rocky relationship for the last few years, and that the medical examiner has been slow in giving them information. So the ME, still 2.5 months later, hasn't accelerated this to a point where the LAPD knows whether they've even called it a homicide, what the toxicology results are. And we talked to somebody today connected to all of this who was grousing that when there was some activity on Celeste Rivas's page on the ME's website today, this person groused, well, in the Matthew Perry case, we had to find out what the cause of death was from the media because the medical examiner didn't even tell us. So there you go. There's a tense relationship between the two now.
It started a number of years ago, but by the time they get to court, they will admit generally under cross-examination that their primary source of information is the IO. And that's where they get most of their information. That shapes to some degree what they testify, even though they always claim that they're independent. I take that with a grain of salt. You are right that there is a history as of late, and more so with the LAPD than the LA County Sheriff.
Right.
And that actually started under the previous administration. The Jim McDonnell has been doing who's now the chief of LAPD, used to be the LA County Sheriff, has been doing a yeoman's job by all accounts to try to repair that relationship. But, you know, it's like turning the Titanic. It's not an easy or an overnight
Okay,
ability.
we got to zero in on what you said because I think it's so important. So you're saying that there is another suspect other than David who the LAPD has its sights set on with respect to what happened to Celeste before, during, and after her death, correct?
Correct. And
Is
by the way, they have reverse engineered, as you know, they have the records. They know when that car was parked. So they had the outer limits of when they think the farthest out was when she could have been when she could have died. They then have reverse engineered that and have concentrated on triangulating all of the other GPS, cell phone, cell tower, social media, all of that information has been layered over in order to get, when I say triangulation, it's actually, that's a simplistic way of putting it. They actually do maps, so to speak, in layers. And so they know where the information is. They use the various techniques to try to show minute by minute where somebody is. And they've actually done that and reversed it. What they did find, however, is what I'm told, they did find information that showed that somebody knew about what had happened at that in connection with the parking of the car when David was out of the jurisdiction.
This
One of the
is when the body was found.
Correct.
So do they have a name of the person who was involved with that vehicle?
Yes, they believe they know who it was. Yes, absolutely. They believe they know who it is.
Well, that would
And
tell
I'm
me
not-
that there is video from the Tesla showing who got in and out of that car when it was parked on Doheny Drive.
I did not cross the person. I can think of another investigative technique which would have done this in basically once you know when that car was parked, once you know that that car had not been turned on after X date, you can then, and if you've got a pool of other people that are, once you have the call logs on the phones, you then identify all the people who are on the call logs. You then go get their cell phone information. You take that cell phone information, you get the cell tower information. You then take the cell tower information along with the call logs, and you can, I keep using the term, but you can pinpoint where somebody was when within a general area. And if they keep pinging in the same general area, that generally is indicative, depending on the load on the tower, as to where they are for a period of time. And that is one of the investigative techniques that they use to identify a second person.
So the second person you're talking about is the person who was in some control of that car when it was parked on the street with the body inside the trunk.
Yes, it's the person, the way I understand it is that the second person is a person who is connected to one of the last times that car was moved.
Got it. So that's not necessarily the Santa Barbara trip because that was September.
Correct.
That was late August. Santa Barbara was spring.
Yeah, but understand, that gives them, once that car stops moving, once they have no data that suggests that that car had ever been moved again, they know, okay, or at least it's a working hypothesis. We don't have to deal with after whatever date that is. We go backwards. So they started moving backwards, and they then saw all of the various trips that were taken. That is what I believe they have, your source, because I don't know who your source was, nor would I ask
Sources on this.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
100% on this.
Right, but that would, what you're saying jives with what I've been told in terms of the investigative techniques, that what they did is reverse engineered it, if you will, from the last time the car was moved, what trips were taken, and they then focused on the trips that were taken. And my understanding is that there was a social media component to that, meaning there were posts that were made. And when they saw where the posts were made, they were then able to also determine where that was geographically. And that, my guess is, taking what you told me, that's how they pinned it to Santa Barbara County. Although the posts, if you were to look at the post, you would not be able to tell because there were no markers, there was no sign, it wasn't at a hotel or a club that you could identify from the post.
Right.
It was because of the geographical location that was pinpointed by all of these other extra techniques that they have.
So maybe the most critical question then, the person you're saying is a suspect, aside from David, who somehow had something to do with that car when it was parked on Doheny Drive in late August. Is that the person who is somehow also connected to the Santa Barbara trip in the spring?
Could be. That I didn't drill down on, and I don't know that the person knows. But what I will tell you is the reason that I push back a little, just not because I know anything, because it was just from the premise, is that the person that is the focus, the other person, is not somebody after the car was found. That would appear, or somebody close in time. It's somebody who was geographically overlaid with his location, and they are surmising from that circumstantial evidence that the two of them had a connection to either the trip or something that potentially could have been untoward.
I'm a little confused. Is that second person somebody they believe was in Santa Barbara with David?
I believe that, yes, they think at some point on the trip.
I mean, that is the only thing that makes sense to me that would go with cutting up the body. That's the only
Yeah,
thing
I
that,
don't know. By the way, I still am not convinced that that necessarily was the case, because I heard stuff that made no sense. I heard um, other kinds of speculation that didn't make sense. I'm still not convinced that there was a cutting up. But if there was, that was separate and apart, that would be post-mortem, after death.
oh yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so there
And
is.
maybe long after death.
Correct, correct. And then that presents all kinds of investigative issues.
But do you
Not
do you understand what I'm saying? That when we were told very clearly, and again, I have this 100%, that they believe he had help in dismembering the body. This again is their theory. David has not been charged with this, but that's what they believe. And I'm thinking, well, how would they know just based on looking at the body? Because one person can dismember a body. I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer did it alone. So if one person can do it, why are they so sure he had help? And the only conclusion I can draw is I know they believe they have hard evidence he was in Santa Barbara in spring, and that was a critical moment. And it sounds like, from putting the pieces together, that they believe Celeste's body may have been in that car. So if that's the case, the
and
only
not just Celeste's body, but a second person.
and a second person.
And not necessarily, I don't know whether it was in the car. I don't know anything else. I know that the working hypothesis is that we got to the other person because of a device that was tracked.
Right. And I'm thinking that's a camera from the Tesla.
And
Because
I'm thinking the opposite. Well, I shouldn't say the opposite. I would think that the camera from the Tesla could be, but I think that the more compelling investigative tool here that they
cell phone.
use are the cell phones and the social media postings and the once you get, look, you can find out. I mean, it's frightening what you can do, and I mean it's frightening how far the investigative techniques have come. I remember cross-examining cell phone experts 10 years ago and cell phone experts 20 years ago, and then doing it this year. What they can do now that they couldn't do 10 years ago or 20 years ago is almost out of a science fiction movie. And to the point, and all you have to do is take a look at when you do share my location, or you do kinds of GPS locations and things like that, but the precision with which they can do this and the ability to determine at a certain moment where you are and what you're doing by location, and then comparing that to somebody else's. So you can say somebody was within. I mean, there is a pretty good theory that you can put two people within 6 feet of each other just by using historical data from devices. But think about that for a second, that you could say, I mean, that it's been revolutionary in criminal law in the sense that when people used to say, I remember a murder case that I had many years ago where it took me forever to get the cell phone records, and I actually was able to exonerate the young man because he was more than 13 miles away at the same time that the murder was being committed. And but back then it was very crude, I should say, and rudimentary, because you were still just dealing with this idea of pinging off towers. Now you've got kind of 3 or 4 layers of, we're not just talking cell phone tower information, we're talking location where you can say this person was here within, give or take 3 to 6 feet. It's mind-boggling.
Okay. So
This is what I'm saying. They have crossed
Yeah.
the paths. That's why this other person is in the crosshairs.
So
no pun intended.
I get it. So here's my question that I have not been able to figure out, and I don't even have a theory on it, that if they took Celeste's body to a remote area of Santa Barbara County in the spring of this year, and if they, say, even dismembered it there, how does the body end up in the trunk of the Tesla in late August?
Well, if it stayed there
But
and
why? Why would it
decomposed,
stay there?
that is inexplicable, and you'd have to get into the mind of whoever perpetuated this, which is always hard to do because you always say who is capable of doing something like that in the first place and what is their mind doing. But more importantly, at least to my trying to figure out what a working or a hypothesis here of a theory is, why would you drive all the way to Santa Barbara if this person, and I'm not accusing anybody, and I don't want to convict somebody pre-trial, whoever it might have been, and if they have some indication that she was taken out of the county. See, that's one of the problems with some of this kind of speculation is, while he could have made the trip, and while he could have posted outside of LA County, say for those who are not familiar with the geography here, you'd go through Ventura to get to Santa Barbara County.
It's about 100 miles.
Yeah, it's about 100 miles, 90 minutes away. And you could go post up there. That doesn't necessarily mean that whoever is posting, whoever it might be, that necessarily alive or dead, that she is with them, unless they also are transporting some device which would indicate that, or unless there is some video that shows her there. So those are kinds of the nettlesome details they've got. They may be able to pin him outside of LA County in Santa Barbara County, but they don't necessarily know that if she, God forbid, was not alive, that she was necessarily in the car, unless they've got some video being placed in the car, or unless in Santa Barbara they have video of something being taken out of the car. Those are the kinds of questions that investigators look at.
I got to tell you, I'm thinking of three sources now, and one person just offhandedly referenced hiding a body, but more importantly, I know that the investigators view this Santa Barbara trip as a core piece of this case. And I may be wrong, but I think their operating theory now is that the body was in that car in Santa Barbara when David took that trip. I think that's their operating theory. I'm not saying it's true or not, but I'm saying I believe that based on what I know, that's their operating theory.
If that's the case, are you saying that necessarily she was alive or not alive on that trip?
I don't know, but based on putting pieces together, I think not alive. And I think that's why dismemberment, and again, I understand why you're skeptical of that term dismemberment, because the body was so badly decomposed, they didn't even know if it was a man or a woman. So I get it, but they clearly believe, and I know they believe that this body was dismembered, and I also know they believe that he had help doing it. That's their premise. So
I've had cases where decomposition was mistakenly thought of as dismemberment.
right, but that may be the case.
Push back.
That may be the case, but when you add to that they believe he had help, there's something that they say they know about dismemberment that would lead to a second person. That's why I don't think it's eyeballing the body and saying, oh, he must have had help. I think there must be some evidence of somebody actually helping him, and that's why I keep going back to the Tesla. But I don't know. I don't know whether that video shows anything, but I know they believe that. And
well, look, there are techniques that forensically can be used for and when I say forensically, that you get somebody to opine or give an opinion, how long has this this body, I don't mean to be ghoulish, but this is the terminology how long has the decomposition been? There are ways that they can do that. I've been through this. They do in terms of, I mean, it's somewhat graphic, but there is activity. There are things that happen to the body after one day, after a week, after a month, and they can look at a body. And I've been in autopsies where somebody has presumably been dead for a long period of time, and they take samples and they opine on how long it has been, what kind of environment the body was in during that period of time post-death, and they will then try to relate back as to what happened. I mean, that is not a simple task. And by the way, I've always argued that it's to some degree more of an art than a science in terms of the kinds of leaps that you take in terms of the opining. What are the foundations for that? In this case, I think that there are a whole lot of assumptions that they have to do, or they have to build on to get to the number two person, who they clearly have a focus on, and they're running it down, and as well they should. And as to David himself, I mean, there are fundamental issues with the investigation, which is, by the way, why I think they have not arrested him, and why they have been, at least initially, so close to the vest with the information they're releasing. There's just way too many variables at this point.
So, two things. One is, I will tell you that my best source in this, I was
Is it law enforcement?
I'm not going to say. I'm not even going to say.
Okay.
I can't even go there. But I'm 100 on this. I raised the issue of the Santa Barbara trip, and I didn't understand how the body would then end up in the Tesla. And all I was told back was, don't try and use logic to understand this, which is kind of an interesting comment in itself. So I want to leave you with my last and biggest question. You have a name of somebody they're looking at, and I know why you don't want to use the name, and you shouldn't use the name. But let me.
I won't do it.
No,
I'm the first guy. If I was representing,
I got it.
I'd be the first one to condemn somebody getting prematurely
but I
hung out to dry.
I can ask a legit question. I think you can answer without compromising anything. Man or woman?
That's a compromise.
It's 50% of the population.
Yes, I understand that's 50% of the population.
Now,
Can I tell you something? Internet sleuths at this point are so good at what they do that the last thing I'd want to do is confirm one way or another. All I will tell you is that they have closed the circle on what their investigation is at this point. I give them, and you don't often hear me say this, but I give them a lot of credit.
I do too.
For the painstaking, methodical analysis that they've done in this case. It's just so counterintuitive from what I'm used to seeing that's why I think it's fascinating to you and fascinating to me. We've been doing this collectively for what, almost 100 years. It's really
why do you always end with that?
But it's incredible the tools that are being used in this case.
I know. Wow, this is fascinating. This was really interesting. Have a good weekend, my friend.
You too. Thanks.
Yeah.